Good day, everyone. Hi, Catherine. Hi, Mickey. So, as you see on my screen, this is the start of the Be Your Own Boss, presented by me. Thanks for joining me. I want to try to make this as interactive as possible. I wanted it to be our journey and not just mine. If you have any questions, feel free as we go along. There'll be some pauses in the between, trying to get some interactions or questions from anybody who's present. And with that, let me go to the next slide. Just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. Graduated from University of Texas Arlington with a aerospace engineering degree. Went to work for General Dynamics, then worked for Boeing for a little bit. I've worked for Boeing for at least 25 years or so. Worked within the aviation industry for upwards of 30 to 35 years. Been a travel engineer for the first 5-10 years. I went from Fort Worth all the way to the Northeast and the Philly area. Wife and daughter are my world. That's what I live for. Hobbies is reading. I do a lot of self-help books, a lot of textbooks, a lot of business books, just to keep myself up to pace on autobiographies and how people got to where they needed to get to. 3D printing is my new hobby. I wouldn't say hobby / business. I'm trying to make that a business as well. And video games. And I'm very dedicated to, my family and the legacy I leave behind. And one of the interesting stories I have over my career, and this just happened in 2019. I had just left Boeing in 2014, just due to the fact of maybe I was just an older engineer, was costing too much for them, or it was just the wrong timing. But I felt like I was kind of put out the pasture rather early. I had just started another job at another aviation Italian company in Northeast Philadelphia. About this time in July in 2019, I was getting the idea that time was short with that company, just the way it was being operated, who I was working with, how they were operating the business, and just the fact it wasn't a U.S.-based company. It was an Italian-based company. So there's a lot of politics, a lot of cultural differences, and my wife and I, we've been thinking about it for a little bit. So we need a set of values to make our decisions by. So we came up with this family declaration of decency and growth. So not only are we going to ensure that we grow as individuals, but we grow as a family, and we also make decisions based on these values, whether it be what businesses to work with, what enterprise or entrepreneurial businesses we want to start. It's all based on this. That's kind of the general story of this. And as you see, my wife and I signed it, and even our daughter Ariel signed it when she was 7, and now she's 5. And I actually just showed it to her again, and we actually posted it on one of our walls just to remind ourselves. It's been 5 years, a little over 5 years, July 4th, and we just want to take umbrance that we did this, and we're continuing to compare our lives to this. Childhood influences, kind of going back in storyline to where I started. I was a Trekkie, or a Trekker. Actually, I was a Trekkie. And so basically the Kirk, Spock, McCoy triangle, the different aspects of their characters, was a very guiding influence. And also Scotty, the engineer, which I eventually became an aeronautical engineer, was a very guiding principle. From that storyline, 72 hours worth of story time, but it was very instrumental in my life, my brother's life, my immediate family all watched it. So it was very pivotal in my early childhood. things I learned from it, space exploration, was always interest of mine, and it still is. I root SpaceX and whoever's trying to get to Mars, and that instead, trying to save what we have on planet Earth is always back in my mind at all times. Seeking out the unknown, talking to new folks, doing something new, not being fearful of something, taking the risk. That's kind of been the staple of kind of the basis of my DNA. And also along the way, when you start to figure out the unknown, you start to compare it back to yourself and discovering who you are, and set your values based on that, set your dreams, and basically set your compass. What is your North Star? And you have to compare it to something, because we're not all on an isolated island. And then I'll open it up for anybody who wants to, as far as what would your childhood influences, if you want to share. I'd appreciate it. If you want to share, please raise your hand, and then we can. Hey, Mike. Okay, Mikey. Yeah, you're still on mute.
Is it okay to come off of mute?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I can't find the little hand raise thing, so
That's fine.
sorry about that.
That's all right.
Well, you're asking about the childhood influences, or things that we were excited about, and fashion was, I guess, my first love. Magazines and fashion design, and kind of the photography, the models, everything.
Cool. Was it just the design, or was there an actual person or somebody who kind of guide you into that, or was it just solely you just being creative of finding that something that kind of pushed you there?
I guess probably I started with paper dolls that my mom bought.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that it was a push or what have you, but it was something I gravitated to.
You gravitated. Got it.
Magazines at our school library, and kind of dive in there and started getting into the models as well as the designers, and just loving all of the images and imagery.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me, if there's no anybody else, let's move on. So, after I graduated college, you kind of have the corporate buzz of thinking you're on a team that can, you can't do anything wrong, or you're just a sponge that absorbs everything that's around you. At least I was as an engineer, learning from the previous generation of engineers, just understanding the practices and how it feels to interact with a team. And it was just the grind of learning, and it feels good at first, and it feels like you can't do anything wrong, or you can, but they're gonna correct you, and you can move forward. You can go to different projects. You can go on to the next challenge, and you always have a helping hand when it comes to that. Well, that's typically the start of at least my career, and probably other people's career. And then, you start to realize, climbing the ladder becomes very lonely, and that's what it started to feel like. I didn't see the right things going on, so I started, speaking my mind and saying this needs to happen this way, because if it doesn't work this way. And then you become isolated because you don't really get this. You get some support just because it's a business and you got a bottom line to meet. But then they start throwing stuff at you. You get frustrated. you start to lose your identity. You start to struggle with your identity because your work-life balance is out of sync. And when that happens, you start to realize you're not spending enough time with your wife. You're not spending enough time just identifying with yourself. Your health becomes an issue when you get stressed out, and it kind of leads to a point where you just almost want to chime out because nobody within the management team really cares about you with that. You report to HR, but HR is kind of a vehicle of the company, not necessarily a vehicle for the employee. And I've had that said to me after I got out of those corporations that was the case. I kind of learned that after the fact. Never learned that when I got the job. So is this who we are? What happened? What's the key thing that derailed that ladder or that correction? And the first thing that comes to mind is our values became not our own. The corporation became our values. Somebody else, our boss's values became our own. Whatever he was shooting for, I was going to work for. Whatever the corporate mantra was, whether it be a good cause or some murky cause that you didn't quite understand why they were doing certain things, and it was never told to you. That's where I came across that the company was going a different direction than what my values were, and that's how I was starting to lose my compass, my North Star. And so I rediscovered my values. I rediscovered my values with my wife, my family. Afterwards, I basically said, I need to start a family. We had our daughter, and it kind of refocused on what those values are, which what is our dream board? Bring back our dream. Take back control. Get back at the wheel, as I said. Get back, put those out. This picture up here with the moon, I've had that probably since I was in college. I finally framed it when we got our house back in 2000, and it's actually sitting in our between our bedrooms on the hall wall. And I always remind myself, think big. And I kind of lost my way when going through that stressful time. But it was always good to put that back on the mantle to be able to guide that way. Having vacations, taking back, getting back my health, doing things that typically we couldn't do, basically taking back control, which kind of leads us back to my pivotal point back in 2019 to show the values of the family and my legacy to guide your decisions. And this is kind of where it led me back to. So with that, I changed and became David the entrepreneur, not engineer for corporate America, as the ways that I started looking at life through. And is there, and are you that person? I mean, or were you that person? I mean, was there any pivotal time in your life that you had where you had to decide to do something different? And I'll put that out for discussion point if anybody wants to. Okay. If that's the case, then if there's no more questions, or if there's anything that we can chat about in more details, by all means, let's have a one-on-one chat and we can talk in more details about, understanding your values, maybe setting your values and going from there. Um,
Well, I think it's interesting. We actually have something in common. I worked for Rocketdyne and I worked for Hughes Missile Systems and I worked for Boeing. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I was like, oh.
Well, I've worked for Boeing, and I worked for which was Augusta Westland, which is a helicopter company in Northeast Philly, but they are an Italian-based company, and they just changed their name to Leonardo Corporation, which I worked for about 5 years. And you go back hindsight, and you're thinking, oh, great, they're going to build a U.S. factory, U.S. engineering team. But when I come to realize that they're just here to, I wouldn't necessarily use the term exploit, but I felt like I was a bit exploiting to a certain extent because of my connections with the FAA and just the fact that FAA was looking for more of a U.S.-based design team, but all the engineers were based in Italy, and it was that's where the values come in. I was like, this doesn't feel right. I mean, if I'm trying to base new jobs in the U.S. for engineers, but yet they're still farming it out to people in Italy, I'm kind of losing the thread of what they're actually doing. I don't know if that's some experience you've had with those corporations or not, or maybe it's a little bit different.
Yeah, my experience was a bit different. So at Hughes, well, one of the things I partook in is Hughes is when they closed the whole facility in one area. So I think that was the first time in my career, the largest amount of layoffs I've ever done. Because my background prior to owning my own business, well, my background's always going to be HR. So that was my background, is in human resources. And when I actually worked at Rocketdyne, it was Rocketdyne, and then it was bought by Boeing. And so, yeah. And I've either been in the admin side or the HR side. So I see life a lot differently than most employees because they're seeing it, of course, from the impact on their side. And I'm looking at it from the company side and the employee side together. So my lens is just a little bit different, but they were all amazing experiences. And, they had their pluses and minuses,
Yeah.
but as do all employment opportunities and running your own business as well.
Right. Right. I mean, that's what drove me to doing, my own business and becoming my own entrepreneur and not looking as being an employee with a company. I think of it as a means to an income, and not, but yet still being who I am and still having side businesses that I can grow into, that I'm not always reliant on the company. Because a company has certain values that don't necessarily always align with individual values. Sometimes it is. Granted, I could go back in time when companies were more family oriented. I mean, it was family owned, and they would treat it as such. And treat their employees as part of the quote unquote family. But when they sold it to a corporation, or they changed it into a corporation, or the original generation of owners moved on, it became a different entity. And you could almost sense the cultural change. I mean, I sense the cultural change at Boeing, back from when I started in the early 90s to kind of the mid to early knots, the 2000s, 2005. It really changed after a lot of mergers happened. The sentiment was more financial than it was keeping people employed or keeping a decent number of, hiring people, but to keep them working as part of the company. right? If there's not enough work coming along, I can understand that, but shouldn't you already forecasted that, or to the certain extent? But or look for more work, all right? Look for more work for your employees. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing.
All right, Victor. I think that's about it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, David.
Thanks, Victor.
Yes, sir.
All right. And we'll talk after this.
All right.
All right. Take it easy.